G'day Cody, welcome to another segment of the ARC Service Park. Good to have you back in the world of ARC.
In a bit more of a virtual way, which is where everyone seems to be at the moment. We've got a pretty nice little place. We've got a river out in front of us and stuff, so it's a pretty nice sort of place to be stuck if you have to be stuck somewhere. So not bad at the moment, but yeah, obviously not where we want to be. We want to be back at work and doing that sort of thing, but for the moment, we'll just deal with it and happy enough to be at home with the family.
What does work consist for you these days? No longer fanging rally cars around the forest. What does Cody Crocker do from Monday to Friday?
The famed days of being that motorsport person, professional driver, is it's sort of dwindling into the past a bit now. I sort of finished as a professional driver, I suppose, at the end of 2017, and so moved into sort of more of just a normal professional sort of a role at Motorsport Safety and Rescue, which is a company that does a lot of motorsport stuff as well as drive programs and things like that for manufacturers and stuff and different brands who want to launch cars and do a drive program for journalists and things. So that's my time at the moment, is spent doing facilitating those drives, organising roads and doing recce's and making sure that the roads suit the cars that we want to try and launch in the best way for the journalists to get the best perception of the vehicle, I suppose.
Well, it sounds like you still do get a chance to do some driving, which is good to hear. But I guess let's take a step back to the glory days that saw you win 3 ARC titles and 4 Asian Pacific titles. Going right back to the start, it all sort of really kicked off for you, didn't it, with winning the junior title back then. Can you tell us a little bit about what that involved and what the prize was?
Yeah, the ARN, at the time it was the Australian Rally Sport News, which was the paper that went back in the days of newspapers and magazines and stuff, was making that. They decided to have this competition called the Junior Challenge, which was pretty amazing thing at the time. You know, what we ended up winning was around about $15,000 worth of seats and harnesses and tyres and suspension, and almost enough to build a car from scratch. And so Dad's mechanics, we would do all our work at home with all of my rallying and his rallying and motorsport. Which was more of a hobby in the early days for Dad, and then continued on, and we built a car out of all those winnings from the Junior Challenge. So we got a Legacy, a Liberty RS Turbo from Japan. It was about $5,000 or $6,000, I think, at the time, and we put all those things in that car that we won from this Junior Challenge, and continued on to try and build ourselves and try and grow in rallying and see where we could go. But it was pretty amazing time, and a very steep curve going from backyard racing, if you like, and doing our thing out of the backyard to joining a professional team in the space of a couple of years.
So tell us, obviously you did a couple of years and then you were picked up by Subaru and obviously worked with Possum Bourne quite closely. I guess that was a pivotal time in your career and really sort of paved the way forward. What was it like working with Possum and I guess a team that had so much pedigree and was obviously being quite successful?
It was such a great time. I was so lucky to be part of that. And from that Junior Challenge in '94, as I said, we built the Liberty up, Legacy up, and did some events. And it was back and forth. We had a few good runs and a few bad runs. We actually got part of the entry part of the winnings was Rally Australia entry in 1995. So we took that Legacy over there, and it was a bit of a disaster, really. The car even the rally car fell off the trailer at 2 a.m. in the middle of the Nullarbor with my dad and Greg's dad, Greg Folletta, my co-driver's dad, in the car. So they had to try and fix that car, to get it to Rally Australia, which was an incredible task because it had tipped on its side. It was still attached to the trailer. It was chained down really well to the trailer, but the whole trailer rolled over on its side, damaged the left-hand side of the car. So it ended up to the point where we couldn't get enough parts that Mum, who was in Melbourne, had to fly over to Perth with 2 left-hand windows out of the car that we had in Melbourne, for somehow we found some parts from a wrecker as a carry-on luggage on the plane to take them over to Perth to be able to put them back in the rally car to go and do the event in '95. Did Rally Australia, got to the 3rd day and tipped the car over and smashed all the windows that we just replaced in the car anyway. So it was a disaster. So we ended up continuing on trying to do what we could with what we had. And did pretty well in some events. Did Rally of Melbourne a few times. In '95, we had a really good run in Rally of Melbourne. '97, we did Rally of Melbourne again in that Legacy in the Liberty, and I think we got 5th up against all big guns, and one of those big guns was Possum Bourne. And, the years before that, we'd been literally watching as a spectator at Rally of Melbourne, watching Possum do his thing, watching Ed and Neil do their thing, and thinking, how amazing is this stuff to be able to go and watch this. And imagine being part of that team. And I remember standing at some of the spectator points at Rally of Melbourne in the early 90s, just thinking, wouldn't it be amazing to be a part of the team to do this sort of stuff? And within a matter of years, as luck would have it, and I think we say it's a bit of good luck and a bit of good management, we ended up being part of the team from 98. So it was, I think, a little bit based on the results from 95 and 97. Greg and I spent a lot of time doing recce's on the Rally of Melbourne roads. Just literally, he had an old Datsun 1200 Ute, and pretty sought after car, actually, just in after the time that he had it. But we used to go and just drive around the roads, not at speed, just doing recce's, just learning pace notes, learning how to be quick on a road with pace notes, and spent most of our time on Sylvia Creek Road, which was one of the iconic stages of Rally of Melbourne for years, and then ended up being able to run on that road and did really well in that event in 97 in particular, I think. And that was the year we met Possum Bourne, so we'd seen him around and probably got his autograph in the early days. And at the end of the event, we've done pretty well, so we were fifth, I think, and having a chat to a few of the teams, and Possum came and leant in the window to Greg and myself, and just as he casually did, and just said, "You boys are doing all right, eh?" And we've gobsmacked, didn't know what to say, just had a quick chat to him, and thought that was pretty amazing. And within a space of a couple of months from that time, we ended up joining the team, which was just a true fairy tale.
You obviously played a enormous part in your career. What's probably the one biggest thing that you could draw, like you could take from him? What did you learn the most? What was his one piece of advice that will still ring true today? He
was such an icon and such a person of so many roles. And after his death, I think it was probably the time that we sat down and reflected on just what Possum meant to us. Because at the time, it's all amazing, and there's Possum, and there's a real person, a real entity there who just does everything and is everything. He was, and again, as we said, after his death, we went through a whole session of reliving and trying to understand what he meant. And we wrote down all of the roles that Possum played, and I think we ended up writing down about 25 roles. He was a mentor, he was a driver, but personality, so many things in the team. And then we wrote down amongst ourselves what we thought we could do of those roles. And all of us, and this is the mechanics of team management. We had a team psychologist, all those people in there. And all of us could only write down for ourselves, 3 or 4 of those 25 things that Possum was. So I think to say that there was one thing that he did is probably understating things a little bit. I think, the fact that he had so many roles and things in the team, and such a leader and such an all-rounder that could do everything. He was a sponsors agent. He was everything. He went and talked to people. He got money. He convinced people they should be part of the team, and kept all that sponsorship going. And so, I think if you put it down to one thing, he was everything. It seemed like it was such a huge part of my life, and at the end of the day, it was 5 years that we spent from joining the team to 2003 when Possum died. So learned so much in that time, which was I think a big stepping stone in helping us build and continue on from where we were there.
And then obviously you continued on from that to, I guess, take 4 consecutive Asia Pacific titles, also with the Subaru brand. How different was that going from the Australian Championship to the Asian Pacific Championship, where there's lots of, I guess, different services, different rounds, different countries, all that? It was obviously another big step in your career. Just tell us a little bit about that.
That was obviously an amazing time, but then to step into the Asia Pacific Championship and go to international events, first of all, the logistics of that is just astounding. We had 2 40-foot containers that would travel around everywhere for us, and 2 rally cars, 2 recce cars, and a service truck actually fit in those containers, as well as all the tyres and everything else. You had to be fully self-contained within those. So I think going from Australia to the Asia Pacific became the next level of that adventure. Everywhere you went then was unique. The writing didn't make sense. You couldn't tell. In China, the most amazing thing is you can't tell, when you're in a village, you can't tell what shops are. You've got no idea what it is because it's just got signage, and it could be a restaurant, it could be a service centre, it could be a shopping centre. You wouldn't know because until you walk in there, it's just so foreign to us. So that adventure, everywhere you went was an adventure, and literally around every corner was some surprise. And we used to leave the in-car camera on as we drive on the transport stages as well as the actual stages themselves, because there was always something interesting and fascinating and ridiculous that was going to happen around the next corner. It could have been like a little, I don't know what they call them. It's like a stationary engine on a two-wheeled unit, which then gets attached to whatever they want. It's a utility vehicle, and they sit half on it and half off it. And, we'll go around a corner and a log truck being towed by one of these things just comes belting out of a paddock onto the road right in front of you. And the footage is just astounding. And it's you think, I've done everything. I've been to, this is very early on from one of the first times we went to China, and you do an adventure and you come back to Australia and you go, right, I've seen everything now. I've had, the dogs running on the track, people on bicycles riding down the road on the stage, and anything and everything happening, and log trucks and whatever else driving the wrong way down the road towards you in the highway in the city. And it's just astounding. And then the next day, when you go back there, something else will happen that's just above and beyond that thing, and it just keeps continuing. And so the amount of footage that I've still got, and I've been looking through it just recently, actually having lots of time at home to reminisce and see what just the amazing things that went on. So that adventure was just astounding. It was half of it was rallying and doing the motorsport and being professional, but the other half was just adventure of not knowing what's coming next. And to me, China was probably the most fascinating place for that. It was just amazing, absolutely amazing.
So you won 4 titles in a row in the APRC. Out of all those 4 titles, was there one standout? Was it the first one, or was it the last one? Which was there a standout performance for the year?
I think the 06 championship was probably the standout for that, because it was our first big adventure, and it was with Les Walkden. So we were on the phone, and the way it all happened was pretty amazing too. So we'd finished the 05 season with Subaru Australia, and finished the last round at Bathurst was the last rally, and we'd won there, and it was fantastic, and we were all pretty happy, and the championship's all sealed up, and went back past Subaru in Sydney. I was living in Melbourne at the time. Drove back past Subaru, and they said, drop in for a meeting. Drop in there thinking this is a review and congratulations, all that sort of stuff. And they did say that, and then turned around and said, we're disbanding the team. That's the end of that. So we'll keep you on as ambassadors, Dean Herridge and myself. But it's up in the air. We don't know what we're going to do next year. This is the end of 05. And so talking to Les Walkden, he was keen to run a car, as he'd done for Ed and Michael Guest and so many guys in the years before. And Juha Kangas, he'd run people in the Australian Championship for years. He was keen to run myself in the Australian Championship in 2006. But there's a lot of things to try and sort out, I think, at the time, in terms of the TV fund and all that sort of stuff, which Les wasn't very keen on paying. He didn't care about that stuff. He just wanted to go rallying. And it was about a 2-minute phone call that Les had with me one day. And he said, you know what, I can't work out what to do with the Australian Championship. So in his words, he said, stuff it, we're going to the Asia Pacific. So that he said, I'll call you back, and literally hung up, and that was it. So from that moment, within that 2-minute phone call, we'd gone from doing another Australian Championship season to heading off on this adventure to do the Asia Pacific Championship. So, yeah, it's amazing how quickly things happen, and off we went. It was amazing. From that moment on, it was just a whirlwind tour, and to go there not knowing anything about the regions. I'd been to China once before, I think, on a holiday sort of thing, and never been to Malaysia and Indonesia and those areas. And yeah, it was just fascinating to go there and just again experience the adventure of it all, but as well as going rallying, and actually then fortunately managing to win the championship in that first year was pretty special. So that one will go down as a special one, especially because Les was just a bloke from Tasmania, wanted to go rallying and supported us to go and do this championship, which was just amazing.
So we did 4 APRC titles. We then came back to Australia, and you competed in what was the inaugural side-by-side championship, and went on again to win that. So there's probably a lot of things that you haven't won. What was, that like? I guess you sort of came back to the ARC, but in a different class, different category. But they looked like a lot of fun. I started competing just about that time as well, and always saw you guys always had a smile on your face. What was the side-by-sides like?
Yeah, dirty smile too, because you get covered in muck because they were open vehicles. So you had a couple of, a roll cage around you. Obviously, we built it as a proper cage and things, and but no windscreen to speak of. So anything that you go through, any mud and water splashes and stuff. And one of the first events I think we did was that the Calder Park around that Scott Pettit organised early on in the championship. And yeah, we went there with high hopes of having lots of fun, when we ended up, and it was the wettest weekend we'd had in years, and ended up being as muddy as you could believe. But yeah, what an amazing thing that was. A bit of a transformation. Excuse me. We go through all the rallying and the career of that, which was fantastic. But I had a bit of an association with Polaris for a few years as well before that. So, and they were bringing out this Razor, the side-by-side vehicle. So they were looking for a niche, I suppose, or somewhere to actually run that vehicle, and they wanted to do some motorsport. And Polaris, being US-based, they had a big motorsport background in the US and wanted all of their regions to participate in motorsport as well. So fortunately for me, it meant that I got to jump into this thing, and it was, looking back now, they were quite a small vehicle. It grew from basically an oversized quad bike, was their first version of this, the Razor, in about 2008, and it gradually grew and got bigger, wider, longer and faster. I suppose it started out being about 65 horsepower, which is more just a recreational vehicle. Michael Guest had the Can-Am version, and they actually had a removable rear tray because it was a utility vehicle, which was used for farm use primarily. And so to actually go and do some motorsport, they had a removal kit to get rid of the rear tray, so you didn't have your tilt tray sitting on the back of what was supposed to be a race vehicle. So yeah, it was a real evolutionary, I guess, process in terms of trying to make this thing into a race vehicle from what was a recreational vehicle to start with. And then so to both Can-Am and Polaris, they spent a lot of time trying to develop that. And we worked a lot with CAMs to actually get a class set up so that we could run those in the Australian Championship. And yeah, what a blast that was. I thought they were 70% of a world rally car. They had, maybe less than 70% of the speed, but they had about 70% of the grip as well. So it was actually a real lot of fun. They had lots of travel. They looked a bit dinky-die when they were driving around from the outside, but when you sat in them, I think they were the most amazing things because you lived every moment of it. You had, all the air blasting through you. You're out in the elements. You're belting around through the roads, and to race them on some rally roads. The guys who raced with us, Michael Guest and those guys in the championship, in all of our different vehicles in the side-by-side category, until you sat in and raced it, you couldn't really understand what it was all about. It was so much fun to be in that vehicle, and such a vehicle you could drive so hard because you could hit bumps and everything so hard because they had 18 inches of travel, and it's a proper off-road vehicle. But to go rallying in them was just a real blast. One of the guys that I met up with, Ian Hughes, who was actually trying to run some off-road events, ended up in one of these as well, and just the rallying was probably the best time he's had in these vehicles.
In your time with Subaru, I guess have you ever driven another rally car other than a Subaru? And have you ever driven a world rally car?
So some fun facts there. Actually, I was thinking about it the other day. From '98, when I joined Subaru as a professional driver, if you like, for the 20 years or so, every car I drove in the Australian Championship and the Asia Pacific Championship was a Possum-Born Motorsport built rally car. So even with Les in the Asia Pacific Championship, that was a PBMS built car. And then with Motor Image, the next 3 years, they were all PBMS built cars as well and run. So I had a really fantastic, fortunate time to be driving probably the best built cars in the world, I think, in motorsport, in rallying. The PBMS was second to none. Even I've actually, and so getting onto that, I've driven all PBMS cars for the entire career, except for the exception of China. A couple of events I did in China, some of their national championship events. Went over there and couldn't get enough of China, so I went over there and raced some interesting cars over there, mostly Subarus. In fact, all Subarus over there, but sort of some of them locally built and stuff. So probably not quite the same standard as the PBMS cars, and that gives you a good understanding of just how good the cars you've got are. So I'd go and do a round over there, and they'd bring in some dodgy brake fluid that looked like washing detergent or something, and we'd run out of brakes at the 10-kilometre mark at every stage, so you'd have to coast through to the end, and then you come back and hop in a PBMS car, and it's night and day. It was just, we had such an amazing time with those cars because you could really anyone who's driven those cars understands just how good they are, and even just the build quality. People look at scrutineering and come through and just look at those cars, and they're finished to perfection. So the only other types of cars I drove were in Indonesia. I did some training with the young guy Sean Galale, who's now gone on to do a lot of circuit racing and stuff in Formula 2 and a lot of other stuff. I was doing some training with him when he was about 12 years old, and he actually had not one, but two pro drive cars that he would run Indonesian championships. So he was too young to drive, of course, being 12. So he'd go over there and do about 3 days of testing in his test car, and then we'd hop into the rally car, and I'd drive the rally car, and he would do the pace notes for me in the Indonesian rounds.
Well, mate, thank you. That wraps it all up from our point of view. It was a great insight, and thank you for taking the time out.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Thanks for the chat. It's been good. It's good to reminisce about all those fun times. It really was such an amazing time, and I was very, very fortunate to have such an amazing team behind me. That was the big thing. We had some great results, and some more fun facts was, in the 20 years or so, I think I won about 16 championships. And one of those, people sort of go, oh, that's fine, but what about the other 4 years? So then I could sort of say, well, 2 years we didn't compete in a proper championship, and one of the other years I came second to Possum in 2002. And then I think one of the other ones was the last year of the side-by-side racing where Simon Evans won the championship and I was nowhere. But it's been an amazing time.